Russian tortoises versus Sulcata tortoises. In this video, I'm going to be going over pros and cons and just general things that I've picked up on while caring for both of these species. I highly encourage you to watch this entire video, especially if you're interested in getting one of these tortoise species. You can never know enough about these animals, and it's a responsibility that you are going to be taking care of for possibly over 60 years. I've been keeping Russian tortoises for over 7 years. In fact, one of my Russian tortoises I have today was my very first turtle really ever. I still have him. His name is Amy. He's right here. And Sulcata tortoises, I've had a few of them in the past. I had one really before I knew what I was doing, but I've had this Sulcata for over 2 years, and I had one before it for about a year. So we're going to jump right into it. Pros, cons, and just general advice. First, we're going to be going over Sulcata tortoises. Now, it's going to be compared to Russians because this is what this video is about, but let's just get started. Sulcata tortoises are pretty readily available. I mean, you can find them at any reptile show, pet store, Craigslist. It may not be the best idea to get them from certain places, but they are readily available, and most of the time they're pretty cheap, which is a good thing for a beginner keeper. But nonetheless, Sulcata tortoises are available, and here is the factor that puts Sulcatas way over Russian tortoises in this category, and that is they're all captive born. There are no more imported Sulcata tortoises that you can buy. There are some adults out there, but those are well integrated with breeding projects, and it would be extremely hard and extremely expensive for you to buy a wild-caught Sulcata. Now, just because the Sulcata tortoise is captive born doesn't mean that it's going to be in the best of health. When it comes to Sulcata tortoises, and well, pretty much any reptile, you really want to buy it from a well-known, good reviewed supplier. Don't just run down to the pet shop and pick up a tortoise. Don't just run down to a reptile expo and the guy is telling you all these great things about these tortoises and you don't really know a lot about them. And I mean, you kind of want to think of them as car salesmen, right? When I got one of my Sulcatas, this was a few years ago, and it was a hatchling, and I didn't really know what I was really doing. The guy told me that they like to eat fruit, and he had fruit in there with them, and it showed them that they were eating. Now, here's the thing. If you have a tortoise that you're interested in getting, and there's fruit in there, and it's at a reptile show, there's a decent chance. I'm not calling everyone frauds or fakes or anything. There are a lot of good, knowledgeable people out there. But if there's fruit in with them, a lot of times people do that because there's a lot of sugar in that fruit. And it wakes them up. It gets them energized. I mean, they're baby tortoises, just like baby people or kittens or puppies. They are, in fact, different. They have different personalities than the adults. They are kind of rambunctious. So when you give them sugar, they wake up and they perk up. And that fruit has a lot of moisture in it, which helps their eyes get clear. Now, here's the thing. Their bodies can't process sugar. Sulcata tortoises and Russian tortoises, you shouldn't really be giving them fruit. The only fruit you should be giving them sparsely is watermelon and cantaloupe. That's basically it. And even if it's that, it's like once or twice a month, and it's a seasonal thing. So if there's fruit in the enclosure, hold off. Now, this could be looked at as both a huge pro and a huge con, and that is Sulcata tortoises, they get huge. Okay, I'm talking 200 pounds. It's not unlikely for your really well cared for hand-raised Sulcata to hit 200 pounds. It's their species. Now, that is a huge factor for some people, whether it's deciding to get one or not. But something you have to consider is, even though you may just think of it as a cute little tortoise now, it's not going to stay that way forever. It's within 2 years, 3 years, you're going to have a decent-sized tortoise. And if cared for properly, and it depends on where your climate is too. If you live up north, I don't recommend a Sulcata unless you're really serious about this. Sulcatas are a huge commitment. They get big. I say this a lot, and people interested in them hear this a lot, and they just kind of surpass it. These guys are life commitments. You can't just get rid of them when they get too big. You can't just keep them in their enclosure. They don't stay the size of the enclosure. They get however big they're going to get because it's genetics, partly, and another part is care. but they get huge. Now, if you live in, like, let's say South Florida, or just anywhere in the South, or even, you know, out west, or you're like in the Southwest, and you can afford the care for a big sulcata, go for it. I mean, I'm all for it. Like, check out a rescue. They have a lot of adult sulcatas that are needing homes. And lastly, for my written down pros for these sulcatas is they are very personable tortoises. I mean, they got popular for a reason, as did the Russians. They're not really that shy, and if you take care of them well, they're just really outgoing. In fact, a lot of people compare them to dogs, cats, goats. I mean, they really are very personable animals. Just because they're reptiles does not mean that they won't remember you. Because trust me, when I walk in my reptile room here, these animals know if it's me or someone else. And it's a really, really cool, fascinating thing to see. So we just covered the pros for the sulcata tortoise, also known as the African spur-thighed tortoise. Now let's quickly jump over the cons real quick before we get into the Russian tortoises. Con number 1, they get big. If you are, I don't know, a 12-year-old, you wanna pet tortoise, that's great, go for it. But if you don't have a plan for it when it gets big, don't get it. They get big. And just because, you know, they may only get this big, does not mean that you can just let them loose in their area. I mean, these things will destroy your house if you let them loose in your house. They can rip through metal fences. They dig holes, you know, feet in the ground, 2, 3, 4 feet in the ground. I mean, it's not unheard of. They are very destructive tortoises, and if you don't know what you're doing with a big tortoise, or you don't have the space to care for it, don't get one. And I covered this in the pros. They're cheap as hatchlings. In the long run, if you keep a sulcata tortoise throughout its entire lifespan, that tortoise is going to be far more expensive to care for than a Russian tortoise. And that is in everything, including diet, enclosure, possible vet visits, and just general care. I mean, that $80 hatchling tortoise compared to that captive-born Russian that could be close to $200, trust me, that $200 now is going to be far cheaper in the future than a sulcata tortoise. Now here's something that I personally have discovered, and I know a lot of people have this same issue, and that is when they're hatchlings, right? When they are hatchlings, they are harder to care for. They are not the easiest thing to care for in the world. They're not extremely hardy as hatchlings. Just like other animals, just like if a dog had puppies, there would be the runt of the litter. Well, with tortoises, they have so many babies because in the wild, so few of them actually survive. And there's a good possibility you could get a runt, a genetically defective one. There's a thing called failure to thrive, and that's when you do everything right, but they just don't make it for some reason. But when they're hatchlings like that, they're so sensitive to lighting, to temperature, to humidity, to diet. Everything, you have to be very involved with it when it's a baby, and it could take a few years before it gets established. And I really want to caution you, because a lot of people get emotionally attached to their little baby sulcata and think they're doing alright. Even something might happen to it that was completely unrelated to the caregiver. I just want to put that out there, that they are harder to care for than Russian tortoises. And here's a factor you may not have thought about. A big tortoise equals big poop. Yeah, I mean, you get a 200-pound sulcata tortoise walking around your yard. Let's just leave it at that. Alright, so it's time for the Russian tortoises. I just want to let you guys know, if there's anything that you guys have questions on, leave them in the comments below. Or if you think I may have forgot something, definitely let me know, because if I forgot a lot of stuff, or you guys have been really good questions, I'll make a part 2 to this video, or I'll just completely redo it. So let me know, questions, comments, concerns, put them in the links down below. Let's move on to the Russian tortoises. Russian tortoises, they are arguably the most popular pet tortoise in the United States and possibly worldwide. There's a reason for that, and it's because they are just the perfect storm of a good beginner tortoise. And so many people discredit Russian tortoises because, I mean, yeah, they stay small. That's a huge pro. They stay small. Like, this tortoise down here I'm going to show you right now, this is just about as big as you're going to get with a Russian tortoise. I mean, they can get bigger, especially if they're captive born and cared for really well for their whole life. They can get up to 10 inches long, but that's rare, and that's if you get a female. But here is the list of cons. They are the most worldwide known pet tortoise because, for the sole fact, there are more Russian tortoises in the United States than there are in their native land, which is Afghanistan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan. Yeah, they're not from Russia. They're from Central Asia. It's kind of a long story, but we'll get to that another day. I'm saying this because almost all of them are wild caught. And that is a huge problem on so many levels. And I don't want to get into it in this video because this video is pros and cons of Russian tortoises and Sulcata tortoises. But quickly, a rundown for that. Wild-caught tortoises are very prone to parasites. They can have up to 4 kinds: tapeworm, hookworm, pinworm, and actually it's just those 3. Those 3 parasites. I was thinking there was a 4th. And on top of that, when you take an animal out of its natural environment, it's decreasing the wild population, and that's never a good thing. And there's so many in captivity now that there's no reason to bring more in. You know, they're so available. People need to start breeding these things, which is not done because of a list of things, mainly because they need to be brumated, which is the reptile equivalent of hibernation, if you didn't know that. And they're just, generally, they're not the most attractive tortoises. I mean, they're darker in color, they're smaller, compared to like the redfoot, the cherryhead tortoise. A lot of times, you know, advanced keepers don't really want them, so they're not really highly on the market for a whole variety of keepers. Generally, the biggest con of them. Now, this con does also cover the cicadas, but I would kind of say more with the Russians, just for the fact that they're not being bred as much. And that is, there is a lot of misinformed caregivers. Those would be your pet store employees, that guy you met at the reptile show, your friend that's had it for 2 years and he didn't really know what he was doing. There's the teacher at your school who had a class pet. There's the guy on Craigslist that told you he's had it for however many long. I mean, it just goes on forever. Everyone kind of has their own opinion on Russian tortoises, and you really need to find the good keepers. You know, I'm very lucky to have a specific keeper that I can message. He's a really great guy, but it's hard to find good information for these tortoises, and it's very crucial because they require specifics. You know, their care is not as easy as throwing them in a tank or throwing them in a box and giving them food. It's not that simple. So for the Russian tortoises, it is a shorter list of cons, but I don't want you to discredit the wild-caught thing. That is a huge, huge factor on why you may want to consider a Sulcata over a Russian. Now we've got that out of the way. Let's get into the pros. I mean, there's so many. 1, they stay small. Like I said, the biggest you're going to get with a Russian tortoise is going to be an adult female, and that's going to be 10 inches long. That's if you have one that's captive born, that's been taken care of really great its entire life. 2, they are very hardy, even as hatchlings. Now, as hatchlings, anything is going to be, you know, less hardy because their immune system's not built up. But in general, since they don't require as much humidity and as much direct needed temperature requirements as the Sulcata, they're not going to pyramid as much, and they're easier to accommodate with your normal, you know, indoor environment, if you will. You know, just a quick mist in their tank as hatchlings is good enough. Their diet, those Sulcata and Russian diets are pretty much the same, but they are much hardier, especially with the adults. I mean, they can handle just about anything. Next is their price. I highly encourage you to get a captive-born baby Russian tortoise. There are more of them now than there was even a year ago, and you can find them. You know, you may have to order online, but there is now really no more excuse to not get a baby captive-born, or even just a few-year-old captive-born Russian. They are out there. Now, they are a lot more expensive than the baby Sulcatas. Like I said earlier, in the long run, it's going to be so much cheaper. I mean, yes, the immediate price for the animal at that moment is more expensive, but 50 years down the road, it's going to be so much cheaper to care for a tortoise that's this big rather than this big. I mean, just it's facts. It's just how it is. You know, they're so much cheaper. And lastly, of the topics that I have thought of, because of their small size, they require a smaller enclosure. You don't need to dedicate an entire backyard for one tortoise. You can if you want. I'm sure they enjoy that. But, you know, a smaller enclosure is okay with them. And a lot of times you can build them yourself, like a tortoise table. Or you can use tanks. There are certain things you have to do to kind of modify the tank, being able for it to correctly accommodate for the tortoise. But their enclosures are fairly small. They're very personable tortoises. They're not shy of you. They love people, especially this girl here. But those are the pros and cons. If you have, like I said, any questions, drop them below. Now, I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Hope you pulled something away from this video that maybe you didn't know before. I hope you enjoyed watching. Like I said earlier, questions, I will get back with you. Unless this video gets like 500,000 views and I don't get notified when someone comments. So I'm here for you guys. I want to educate you guys on your tortoises or future tortoises. So I just want to leave with that. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe. Alright, make sure to subscribe. I've given you so much information. The least you can do is subscribe. I mean, it's not that hard. Just click the little subscribe. Just click it. That's all you got to do is click it. Alright, that's enough of that. Thanks for watching. Hope you subscribe. Make sure to leave a like. If you want to help support the animals, make sure to check out in the description below, and you can purchase anything on the Amazon wish list. There's for the aquatic turtles, the box turtles, and the tortoises. It will be shipped directly to my P.O. box, which is also in the description below, and I will open it on camera, and you'll get to see my reaction and so on and so forth. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and have a great day.